This is OwlUp, where learning happens in minutes, not hours. For a deeper journey, explore all our courses at owlup.co. Now, let's dive in. Welcome back to Chapter 3 of our series, The Fall of Rome, What Collapsed a Civilization? In this episode, titled Political Decay, When Institutions Stop Working, we're going to explore the key political institutions that once held the Roman Empire together and how their decline contributed to its downfall. So, let's dive in. Cicero once bragged he could defend the guilty and destroy the innocent using Rome's own laws. In this episode, we step into a world where rules still exist on paper, but stop working in practice. When does a political system quietly cross that line? So how do we know when a system is rotting from the inside, even while its official rituals keep going? One clue from late Republican Rome is the gap between what offices were supposed to do and what they actually did. Elections still happened, speeches were still given, courts still met, but more and more, outcomes followed money, family networks, and threats, not arguments or votes. It's like watching a public auction where everyone pretends to bid, but the winner was decided at a private dinner the night before. As Rome's empire ballooned, so did the opportunities. Governors could strip a province in a year and come home rich enough to buy juries, fund private gangs, and treat public offices as investments to be recouped. In this episode, we'll track how that quiet shift, from shared norms to raw leverage, turned everyday politics into a slow-motion breakdown. As Rome expanded, its old tools stayed strangely small. A handful of annual magistrates were suddenly expected to manage vast territories, booming trade, and millions of new subjects. Instead of redesigning the machinery, Rome just turned the existing dials harder. More ad hoc commands, more emergency powers, more informal deals. Think of a software platform that keeps bolting on patches instead of refactoring its code. Eventually, bugs become features, and only insiders know how to navigate the glitches. In late Republican Rome, those insiders were a shrinking elite, fluent in exploiting every loophole the system refused to fix. By the late 2nd century BCE, Rome's institutions looked intact, but inside, their wiring had been quietly rerouted. Start with money. Provincial commands turned into investment opportunities. A governor went out for a single year with almost no salary, huge discretionary power, and a network of equestrian tax farmers eager to help. The deal was simple: squeeze the locals, skim off the top, split the profits. When Cicero prosecutes Verus for allegedly looting 40 million sesterces from Sicily, he's not describing a lone villain. He's attacking a business model. Offices became less like civic duties and more like high-risk, high-yield financial products. You borrowed to win office, exploited your term, then used your gains to buy protection and climb higher. That logic seeped into elections. Campaigns were officially about virtue and service. Practically, they were about building a payoff schedule. Distribute grain here, sponsor games there, quietly promise judicial favors to allies who will later sit on your jury. Over time, the cost of staying competitive rose faster than the legal ways to fund it. The temptation to blur lines, gift versus bribe, friendship versus obligation, stopped being an exception and became the operating system. Procedural tools also changed character. The tribunician veto, designed as an emergency brake for the people's representatives, was increasingly pulled as a routine partisan weapon. When you see it invoked dozens of times in a few decades, you're not just looking at passionate debate. You're watching a traffic intersection where every faction learns that blocking is safer than moving. Paralysis isn't a malfunction for them, it's leverage. Violence followed the same path from last resort to normal option. Street gangs hired by rival nobles, prosecutions threatened or dropped depending on factional needs, senatorial debates held under the shadow of what angry allies might do outside. Each time a norm was broken without serious consequences, and a legal candidacy tolerated, a blatantly rigged trial allowed to stand, it set a precedent. Everyone does it, slowly replaced, "We don't do that here." What makes this pattern dangerous is how quiet it can look from the inside. Statues still shine, ceremonies still impress, offices still have Latin names. But more and more, those offices are shells occupied by private networks whose real negotiations happen elsewhere. Think about how many workarounds you see in big systems today. In late Republican Rome, people didn't announce, "We're ending the Republic now." They just kept stacking workarounds until the unofficial rules mattered more than the official ones. Take wealth concentration. By the mid-2nd century BCE, a senatorial career practically required millionaire status in sesterces. Land in Italy pooled into ever fewer hands. Veterans and the urban poor felt locked out of the upside of empire. Reformers like Tiberius Gracchus weren't proposing revolution. They were asking, in effect, why a tiny slice of citizens could treat conquered land as a private portfolio while the state carried the risks of war. Or look at tax farming. The publicani weren't mere contractors. They were organized financial syndicates, bidding on provincial revenues and then lobbying to keep oversight weak. If your profit depends on extraction and courts are staffed by your peers, legality becomes just another line item in the business plan. Rome's constitution didn't formally change. Its center of gravity did. When that kind of decay sets in, reforms feel less like upgrades and more like threats to someone's revenue stream. Modern democracies face a similar tension. Campaign finance, lobbying, and data-driven micro-targeting can quietly rewrite incentives faster than constitutions change. It's like high-frequency trading in finance. Tiny legal advantages compounded at scale can tilt the whole market. Only here, the asset is governing power, not stocks. When institutions drift like this, collapse rarely arrives as a single crash. It's more like a slow blackout where each neighborhood loses power at a different time. Courts dim, oversight flickers, trust goes dark last. The open question, for Rome and for us, is how early a society can notice those brownouts, and whether anyone still has an incentive to flip the breakers back on. To go deeper, here are 3 next steps. 1. Read Francis Fukuyama's Political Order and Political Decay, and, while you read, keep Wikipedia's pages on Vitocracy and Political Decay open, so you can quickly cross-check the concepts the episode mentioned. 2. Use the Gridlock Index at politicalgridlock.com or similar governance indicator dashboards like VDEM's country data to look up your country's scores on institutional effectiveness and compare them with 2 to 3 countries the episode referenced as cases of reform or decay. 3. Subscribe to and skim one policy-oriented newsletter today, like FixGov, Brookings, legbranch.org, or the Niskanen Center newsletter. Then pick one current institutional reform proposal they mention, for example, civil service reform, primary election reform, anti-gerrymandering efforts, and follow the link to the original bill, report, or campaign site so you can see what concrete fixes are actually on the table. This was OwlUp, your daily step forward. This series continues with more chapters on OwlUp.co. Visit OwlUp.co to access the complete course and continue your learning journey. See you there!